Hello, I'm so glad you're back to listening to the next Photopocene episode. This time I'm joined by Holly Gilman. She's a self-taught photographer and she's recently returned to her love of photography after a break to set up a Facebook group called Making Photographic Practices More Sustainable. Holly talks to me about this, but also about how for her having a children was a catalyst for her growing interest in environmental issues and how it all relates to her own photography, along with her mental health and how it's really important to not lose yourself and also to be kind to others. So the Facebook group is acting as a safe space for people to have conversations about how they can improve or even just find out more about making their photographic practice more sustainable. But since rediscovering her photographic passion, Holly has also been instrumental in the creation of a photo book. But I'll let you learn more from Holly herself. Just realised I actually forgot to say hi, it's me, Josie, Photopocene. So hello. Well, today I'm joined by Holly Gilman, and so thank you so much, Holly, for taking part in the Photopocene podcast. I'm really glad that you're here and that we're going to have a chat about your interest in photography, but also very much your interest in environmental matters and how that relates to photography. So welcome. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, absolute pleasure. I mean, I'm sure you're aware now that Photopocene is all about people with an interest in photography, photographers, photo artists, or those working within the photography sector, and how they might work in relation to environmental issues, whatever that interest might be. I mean, what can you tell us about your background and how you've become to get involved in photography? I mean, I am aware that you have a website where you share your sort of learning journey, because you do sort of an awful lot of self-taught learning. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so when I was at school, I was very much pushed towards the academic subjects, sciences and maths and things like that. And there was almost like an inherent story that I was not creative. But what this meant was that when I got to finishing my A-levels or college, depending on where you are in the world, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it just felt silly to me to go to university when I didn't know what I wanted to do. So, it would have been a waste of money, a waste of time. And I'd probably come out of it with a really generic degree, like business studies or something, which, nothing on those sorts of courses if that's what you're interested in. But I wasn't necessarily interested in it. Yeah. And so I went straight into work. And at the time it felt, I think it's been 10 years or something that I've worked where I work. And for a lot of that, it felt like I was doing something that I didn't like and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And there was all this pressure on me to work out what I wanted to do with my life. But the hobby of photography came to me after leaving school. So I didn't know when I was at school that I enjoyed it. It was through my best friend. Her dad was a photographer, or is a photographer, and she picked up the hobby from him, and that sort of brushed off on me as well. And over the last 10 years, it's just been exploring that. So it started with digital. I then moved into sort of creative lenses and things. I tried a foundation in photography course, which ultimately wasn't really for me because it felt too structured. Yes. I didn't identify with any of the topics being covered, and so my the submissions I was making to that course felt very superficial. There was nothing really behind them. There were fine images, but nothing really there. Yeah. And then in 2015, my dad gave me his old film camera, which, funny enough, I have sat on the desk next to me. It wasn't intentional. And that really sparked this whole other thing. Like it went from a hobby into just this passion, you know, all consuming passion, and I just fell down that rabbit hole.
Brilliant.
I then sort of stopped while I had children. So in 2017, I got pregnant with my first child, and I won't go into the story of it. That's for another time.
Another time.
I ended up not really using my cameras after the birth, and you know, a couple of rolls were done, but mostly sort of I'd load a roll of film and it would sit in the camera for nearly a year and before I finished it, and you know, and then it was during lockdown really that I sort of came back to photography. I fell into quite a bad depression. I think it's really important to talk about that sort of thing. And you know, it was bad enough that, you know, between me and my family, we decided I needed to see a therapist. And it was with that therapist that I realized, you know, I need something for me. I'd become so all consumed with my children that it felt like I was not an independent person anymore. Like, as much, you know, I adore my children, but I needed something that made me that separated me from mother.
Absolutely.
And that's sort of how I came back to the photography, and I felt that fire burning up again. But
well, I can certainly see that from what sort of the research I've done before we spoke, sort of you know, how the things you've got involved with. So I can definitely feel your passion even without knowing you. So that's you know, it's really good that you've come, you know, like you say, you might have been feeling lost or as you've described, sort of not sort of independent as you. And yeah, it's absolutely vital that you have that. So really interesting to see that you found an even bigger love for photography as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, having children changes you so much as a person. And really, I think, I mean, it's going to sound quite self-involved here, but I think it's made me a better person. Because, you know, around the time that I got pregnant, that was when I really started becoming conscious of environmental issues. Obviously, I'd learnt about things in science lessons at school, you know, but it felt so disconnected from me in the world. You know, we were learning about holes in the ozone layer, with, you know, when you're a teenager, that doesn't mean anything. But having children, you know, suddenly it's not just your lifetime, but you're thinking about the next generation and what life is going to be like for them. And so, you know, I started noticing nature around me. I started noticing the seasons. I started noticing the differences, like how much warmer it was getting earlier. And, you know, all these things started playing over in my head. And again, there's a mental health issue there with becoming too obsessed with the environmental issues and needing to find some way to not get completely bogged down and feel like, what's the point? And I think I try to bring that across in what I do. But I, you know, doing film photography as a hobby, I had this niggle in my mind. You know, what is the impact of that on the environment? You know, and I sort of just pushed through it for a little while, and then I started to sort of, you know, discover things like Ed Carr and the Northern Sustainable Darkroom, and therefore Hannah and her the actual Sustainable Darkroom scheme. And it started to inspire that, do you know what, actually I could do something here. We could start to build the information, and I think that's where, you know, it started all coming together for me.
Because last year you I think it was last year, or was it earlier this year, that you've set up the a group on Facebook called Making Photographic Practices More Sustainable, and that's a sort of you're building a resource there to share with other people about how we can work within photography, but perhaps do it in a more eco-conscious manner. And I'm so excited to see this building and more people who are working in the photographic field in whatever form, just sort of looking at this a little bit closer and having conversations about the impact photography has on natural resources and the natural world around us as well. But very much, I think, even touching on what you've just said, all of this is done under sort of the umbrella of balance and compromise and resilience. So is that what led you to set up that group then, that sense of I can do something more?
Yeah, so funnily enough, last night I started reading a book called Catalyst by Jonah Berger, and I've just read the introduction, but in that he very concisely brings together how I feel about the conversations being had around sustainability in photography, well, sustainability in general. And that is that we need to remove the roadblocks to people getting involved. And so I feel like there's this broad spectrum of people. And if we talk about the photography practice, whether that's digital, whether that's alternative process, you've got the people like Hannah Fletcher and Ed Carr. I can't think what his actual name is now, but General Tregan, who runs the eco practice sessions, which I'm booked into this month. I'm very excited about. You know, we've got those people who are really ploughing on, and they're willing to be experimental. They're willing to have images that don't come out right in the name of trying to find an answer. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the people, and I'm sure we've all seen them in those Facebook groups and things, who are aggressive towards anyone who suggests anything about environmental issues and photography, and just say get a different hobby, and you know, they say awful things really. And then you've got all the people in the middle who fall somewhere from don't really care, but don't want to be aggressive about it. It is what it is. To the people who perhaps would want to do something but don't feel like they can speak up. And it's those people in the middle that I feel we need to do something for, and we need to remove the roadblocks for, because most of those people would probably do something more environmentally friendly, something more sustainable, if we remove the roadblocks. They're probably not going to want to go down the route of Caffeinol and making their own developer, but what can we do that's better for the environment? And whilst I'm happy to do experimenting, and I'm looking forward to getting around to trying Caffeinol and things like that, equally I want to start building up the knowledge and the resources around what's already available. And also, there's a lot of these people who won't do the environmentally friendly, what you might call radical acts, because they want good images, they want clean images, they want the images that they're used to from their standard developer. So what can we do for them so that they can still achieve that, but being kinder to the environment?
Yeah, do you think, I mean, because I've been sort of working in eco-conscious ways, gosh, for a long time now, sort of and again, like I say, it's I'm really excited to see how much in the last few years it's really started to become, it's gaining traction. More and more people are getting interested in it, which is is an absolutely a great thing. But totally understand if it's not someone's cup of tea, and if particularly in sort of film relation, processing, printing work, they want to stick with more traditional uses. But do you think there's scope there for, on a commercial scale then, to ever get these, because obviously the home sort of processing, using plants, using things like mint or the Caffeinol options, and looking at ways that we can extract silver from fixer and make sure we're not, people aren't just chucking it down their bathroom sinks. But do you think there's sort of scope for commercial photographic companies to get involved in this then? Do you think there would ever be an option for that?
This is something that is in the back of my mind, is that if I can get the Facebook group to be what's the word, more substantial, that I can sort of give it the backing that it needs, we can then go to these companies and say, you should have like a transparency section on your website that talks about the steps that you're taking to try and make better decisions. So there's already companies out there doing things. Analog Wonderland, for instance, their packaging is all cardboard. They're trying to stock more brands that are working in these ways. And you know, Take It Easy Lab in the UK, I actually contacted them via DMs to ask about what they did with their chemicals. And they explained to me over Instagram DMs that they use a company that extracts the silver.
I know when digital first came out, I think a lot of people saw that as, oh wow, it's a, you know, it makes photography more environmentally friendly. But actually then you look at, well, what do we need to actually create our computers and our smartphones and our technology and our cameras? You know, an awful lot of resources, natural resources, have to go into the creation of those, and the energy to produce them. And so you get all these big sort of potential conversations, and sort of it's almost like you said earlier, I think, you know, if you look at one thing and you end up down a rabbit hole of and sort of, so I guess, yeah, how do you find and where do you think, talking about the fact that when we think about the environment and the potential, you know, sort of worries that can cause us, and then looking at photography and trying to do that in the best way possible. I mean, for you then, how are you sort of finding this sort of coping with the balancing act that we really need to manage in the world we live in the UK, for, you know, sort of, how do you cope with that then?
So as I mentioned earlier, you know, we've got the people like Hannah and Ed who are really paving the way in terms of experimenting, researching. And unfortunately, I don't have the knowledge and I don't have the time to do that. I'd absolutely love to. You know, when I was listening to her episode and she was mentioning about going out to a remote island, was it Finland? Like, that just sounds amazing. But you know, I don't have the resources for that. And so, you know, where can I start to make a difference? And I think for me, that's the big thing, is I want to feel like I'm making a difference. I start to spiral in my mental health when I feel like there's nothing that I can do. And for me, you know, when I talk about these people who perhaps aren't willing to do these more radical, quotation marks, these more radical ideas in terms of photography, helping them to make baby steps towards these better options. You know, the closer they get, the closer they're going to get. Every time they take the next step, the next one's closer. That makes me feel good, and it brings together. So we spoke about the fact that I've got my online learning log that talks about all the things I like to learn. There are so many things that I'm interested in, and I want to go back to, you know, teenage me and help me to understand that it's okay to have that many interests. It's okay to not know what you want to do, and to sort of, you know, having kids, I've looked at things like home education and, you know, all these sorts of things that I want to bring to my kids, about letting them explore their interests, work out what they want to do. It's okay if you start a hobby and you don't like it and you move on to something else. And so this idea of helping to educate people and helping to bring knowledge together into a library of resources, and, you know, potentially one day going into schools and talking about how we can bring art and science together in the photographic way. You know, that's what's in my mind. It's what helps me and what feels like it's working to my strengths. You know, there's no point in me getting down that I'm not able to do things like this Finland expedition. That sounds amazing, but, you know, I can't do it, and I have to accept that. You know, what can I do? What are my strengths? And that's how I sort of keep my mental health in check. Is just, I need to feel like I'm doing some good.
Yeah, and it's good because it's not, you know, sort of the checks and balances. It's not getting overwhelmed, and it's absolutely agree with you. It's fantastic to see what other people are doing and how, you know, and how they're making a difference within this arena, and at the same time, absolutely, where your part you can play your part within that, whether you're pioneering something or supporting something, or just having an interest in what's going on. It's all really valuable and really, really valid. I mean, I have noticed as well, though, Holly, that one of the things you've already been doing, so in a sense you're already contributing to all these different conversations and interests and getting other people involved, is you've written for 35mmc.com. Now I'm not sure if that's how they say it, or if you say it 35 millimeters. Anyway, I'll let you explain. But you've written for them online on across various sort of topics. So is that something then that you'd really like to do more of, sort of the written word about sort of photography and elements of photography?
Yeah, so I think I'm exploring communication channels at the moment. I certainly, through starting my learning blog last year, I realised how much I loved writing, you know, and writing online or digitally helps me because I can't make my pen keep up with my thoughts. So writing online works for me, because that's another issue that I came up with my therapist, is that she goes, you know, do you have an internal monologue? And I said, I don't think so. But what I do have is an inner lecturer. I have this weird thing that kicks in generally at night so that I can't sleep, where I start explaining stuff, or it's almost like I'm teaching something. And it could be good things, it could be bad things, but it makes my brain just go bing, 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 bing. And so writing about it has really helped. It's really helped me get that out of my system so that I can sleep. And so it was shortly after I started writing my learning log that Sroyan, who's another writer for 35mmc, contacted me and said, you know, I can see your learning log. I think he picked out my analysing the role, because I like to look through my images to try and work out what went well, what went wrong. And so it was through that I started writing for 35mmc and enjoyed it so much that within 6 months I was part of the team. So I'm now on Hamish's team. Hamish is the creator of 35mmc, and we Brilliant. You know, we go out and we seek other people who have interesting things to say to come and write for the website. And obviously one of the things that I'm interested in is the environmental aspect. And so when I came across Ed Carr, because I came across him first before Hannah and the Sustainable Darkroom, and I asked him to write for the website, and obviously he did. And so that's sort of how I got in with that crowd, as it were. And that's really where the idea for the Facebook group came from, is from those initial conversations with Ed. I also run a second Facebook group, which is about photography, books and theory. So the idea that we can have discussions each week about different theoretical things. And one of the topics that I brought up was from Ed's Stare into the Cathanol essay. And, you know, it was suggested, I don't think there's anywhere that we can talk about this sort of thing, like dedicated to this specific topic. And, you know, it was being aware that in the context of that particular group, it wasn't appropriate to start constantly talking about environmental issues, but that actually there wasn't anywhere else within Facebook to have those sorts of discussions. And so that's where the idea for the environmental group came about, that we needed a safe space. And I'm very happy to say that I'd had quite a lot of feedback from the books group to say, you know, these are usually topics that cause, you know, combative comments, but that I managed that very well, that people feel safe to talk in there. And so I felt like I was well placed to run this group as well, knowing that it's a polarizing issue, because, you know, for every suggestion that there is to be more environmentally friendly, there's something that you're doing wrong, you know, and that's the way it is. And unfortunately, we won't change that until society changes, you know, until government changes, until big corporation changes. We can't be fully environmentally friendly on our own. But what we can do is we can make these small changes that work for us in the context of living in the society that we do.
Absolutely. And I think there is that sort of touches on sort of individual responsibility versus, you know, governments and sort of, well, companies, businesses, their responsibilities, and I think, you know, there is a lot of discussion to be had there around, and I guess in this context of this conversation specifically, how we were talking about being able to share ideas around our own individual photographic footprint, but then actually looking at sort of the bigger picture in relation to photography. You know, the fact that an awful lot of you know, camera equipment could be short-lived, or is seen as disposable. So yes, there's lots of sort of different angles, and as you say, different opinions. So it's really nice to hear that you've created these safe spaces where people can have respectful discussions, and I guess if there's any disagreements, it's done in a healthy fashion. I'm just looking where I'm sitting now. I've got that is probably one of my weaknesses, is photography books.
Definitely
so
one of mine. I know I've had a few people say I'm not sure whether to join the group because it won't be good for my purse.
Absolutely, and I think as well that in itself, again, you sort of because I just absolutely love holding a book and having a physical object, you know, and then people might say, yes, but creating a book does this and this, and wouldn't it be better to just have it sort of online? And I'm like, well,
yeah,
you
I
know,
think
that
that's
swings and
a
roundabouts
really interesting point.
for everything.
Funnily enough, you know, I don't know whether you know actually, but when you're about to have a baby, you tend to go through what they call nesting, don't you? And in
I have to say, Holly, I actually chose not to have children, so I don't know. But when I moved into my house, I did that. So I guess maybe something I do.
With my first child, I was doing things like cleaning the skirting boards, like it was crazy. And then just before I had my second child, I became obsessed with the idea of decluttering, and I got the Marie Kondo book, and you know, it takes you through all these things.
Yes.
And then I became focused on this idea that I needed to declutter my books, and that was really difficult. And now I'm sort of reflecting on it and thinking, well, do you know what? Books bring me joy. I love, you know, we've just recently finally set up some shelves under our stairs so that I can have all the books out, and do you know what? I just love standing in my hallway and looking at the shelves. You know, I'd love it. I absolutely love books. And I think that's okay. And I think, you know, with photography and things, you know, I feel this sort of consumption guilt with buying new film, you know, things like that. But it's what brings me joy, and I'm doing my best in the areas in my life where I can to reduce my environmental impact. You know, I don't travel overseas very often. It's very rare that I do that. You know, minimal car usage. You know, I do the best I can wherever I can, and so if this is what brings me joy, then, you know, so be it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things I think is either currently bringing you joy, or is going to be bringing you joy, is you were fundraising to help build a darkroom, and I believe you've now achieved that. Is that right? Is that something that you're now excited about?
I'm actually sat in my new darkroom. I'm so excited. I've just this week received some paper and the chemicals, and I think this is a really important point actually, is the part of the reason I set up the sustainability Facebook group is that there isn't really an easy way to find out what's the most environmentally friendly way to go about this, and I wanted to start bringing that information together. And talking of the communication channels and 35mmC, you know, Hamish has said he wants to have like a new thread on there that's for sustainability. By the time this podcast goes out, I should have an article up on Analog Wonderland, which brings together the research that we've done on film developers, Stop Bath and Fixer, and what the issues are, and you know, when I emailed that work over to Paul of Analog Wonderland, he said, you know, I've never seen it written this way. Like, I've never seen this information set out like this. And it's true, that was very difficult to pull together, because you know, and this is why the average person isn't doing it. You know, the companies that are creating the chemicals don't set out the information on the environmental impact. They don't set out their ingredients. It might say hydroquinone based developer, but you don't know what other ingredients are in there. And so setting up this darkroom, you know, I tried to use the Facebook group to bring information together on paper, but again, it's difficult to find out things about whether it's recyclable. There's a lot of conflicting information, whether the plasticky coating on RC paper can be recycled or not. I think it depends on your area. It's hard to find out whether you can actually access photographic paper that's made from recycled paper, anything like that. It's actually really difficult. And so I think it's going to be like a case by case basis. So I've ordered some RC paper to make contact sheets with, because I feel like that will be a bit more long lasting for something that I want to be long lasting, but that going forwards, if I'm making actual prints, I will probably use FB paper, fibre-based paper, so that there's not the plastic coating. But yeah, as I say, it's just so difficult to find the information.
So with you sort of being in your darkroom and looking forward to that, do you actually have what you would call a favourite process as yet? Because I know you're also interested in alternative photographic processes. So do you have one that you're already in love with, or is there a process that you want to try that you perhaps haven't got around to yet?
I'm having to rein myself in. I find it all so exciting. I've got I never know which way around it goes. Is it James Christopher or Christopher James's Bible of alternative photographic processes? But I really want to get used to my darkroom, get used to doing my black and white prints first. So I'm really trying to rein myself in. I've been dabbling with anthrotypes because it's so easy to do. You don't need to get any special equipment. You don't need to get any special chemicals. It's all there already for you. So I have dabbled in anthrotypes. But again, you know, when you're talking about environmental sustainability, anthrotypes is that like top one that's listed as being the best for the environment, but many people aren't interested in it. And so for me, there's a big interest and a big push to getting the film photography, the darkroom stuff, researched and going and bringing that information together, because I think that's where I can make the biggest difference to other people.
Absolutely. And I'm going to keep a close eye on what you get up to, Holly. I'm really interested to see, you know, where it all goes next. What do you've mentioned some of the articles that you're working on, but what else is there? Anything else coming up next then, Holly, that you're looking forward to, or that you're going to be getting involved with?
The first thing that's coming out, and we mentioned earlier that it was Earth Day this month, I am planning to launch a YouTube channel. Yeah, because I know video content is king, and no matter how awkward I feel in front of the camera, you know, I know that that's a really good way to get the message out there. And I'm really lucky that my best friend, the one who got me into photography in the first place, her name is Eve. She's really good at all the digital stuff, so she's doing my editing for me. Which is amazing, because I've got a job that I do 4 days a week. I've got 2 kids. I've got my own, I've got to actually create stuff and do the research and things. So it's great to have her support in turning things around. So we're working towards launching for Earth Day, because with the aim that this channel is going to be mostly around environmental issues within photography. But I'm hoping to make people laugh. I'm hoping for it to be lighthearted, because it just doesn't feel like me to be too serious, and I want it to feel like me, you know.
Yes.
So my goal is just to make me and Eve laugh, but hopefully it will make someone else laugh too. I've got some ideas of some slightly more comical things to break it up hopefully be a bit more lighthearted in these very bizarre times, but that also there's going to be some good information in there.
Absolutely.
Is I've been working on a book, and so that's with 35mmC. We've contacted people from all over the world to talk about their photography practice through the pandemic. So it's one of these books where the text is just as important as the images. It's a body of work. And so we've got 49 artists from around the world, photographic artists from around the world, to talk about their experiences. And I am just in the final editing phases. I hate to say an exact date, but at the end of April, we're going to be doing our pre-launch, which is basically, showing off some of the draft pages, and sort of seeing what the interest level is. So we'll be asking people to sign up with their email addresses and then once we feel like we've got enough interest, we'll be launching a Kickstarter to get it published. So I'm so excited about that. When I first thought of the idea, it was supposed to be like a little zine, like a little magazine type thing. But when I started reaching out to people were so interested that we had so many people wanting to be part of it. And I didn't really want to turn people down. If we get this through Kickstarter and published, that would just, make my whole life. I feel like I've put my values into this, when we started getting submissions and I realised that our diversity wasn't there, it was mostly men, mostly white men or men who were the dominant race in their country, because as I say, it's people from all over the world. I started to try to seek out more diversity, more women to get involved, more people of colour who live in predominantly white areas, and even people from, say, the Asian community living in, say, London. So I feel like I've managed to put my values into that. But then, of course, somebody said to me, well, how do you reconcile your sustainability thoughts with creating a book and the trees that will go into creating a book? And all I can, that is a very difficult one. It's something that I will battle with, and I have battles with. But as I said before, books are my passion. Like they aren't just something to read and throw away. They are something to treasure. And that's how I see photography as well. My images, my negatives are all still in a folder. I love them, I treasure them, and I want to turn them into contact sheets. So that's, in case anyone asks, that's how I reconcile myself with that.
No, absolutely. And, whatever we do really now, from the moment we're born, we're having an impact until, when I was talking to someone actually for a podcast recording yesterday, they actually said there's only really one way we're not going to be having an impact on the world we live in anymore. And that's obviously when we're gone. So no, I think, if you're if you're conscious that this is all about this just eco-conscious, so trying to do things in ways that have minimal or can lessen your impact, but I think spending too much time making themselves feel bad that they're not doing enough is not going to be a useful element. So one of the things with the podcast is that hopefully it will inspire others to sort of find out more, have a think, whether they make a change or not, or do something differently. That's great, but just even thinking about your impact is sometimes enough for someone. So really appreciate what you're saying there. Now, Holly, I normally like to ask everyone to sort of round up the chat a question, and it's quite a broad question, and there is no right or wrong answer. And I think you've probably sort of almost answered it already, but it really is around what you think we can achieve through photography that can benefit our natural world or our use of natural resources.
I think that everybody's answer for that is going to be different. I don't think it's one collective thing that we can do. As you mentioned, like people who are at the forefront of the research, that's how they're going to make their difference. People like me, it's in trying to bring the message more widely. It's in trying to educate people, and for some people, it is literally in just thinking about the environment, thinking about how they can use local resources as opposed to buying in from Australia or whatever. Not that Australia itself is bad, just that that's the opposite side of the world for us.
No, but if they live in Australia, is what yeah,
exactly. You know,
you're local to where you live.
Well, you know, personally, I live near the beach, so you know, it's the idea of what seaweed could I use if I wanted to. You know, it's just learning about your local environment and what's important there. So I think for each person, it's going to be different. And I think that's a good thing, because if we were all doing the same thing, then you know, it's like the issue of avocados. You know, if you're going vegan, but then if you just start eating loads of avocados, that's a problem. You know, it's overconsumption of avocados is bad for the planet. So it's just thinking about your local resources, really.
I think it is. It's the way that we all need to live now is around that balance and that compromise. And you know, that will be the same for photography as any other topic. Well, I've really enjoyed having a chat with you, Holly, and finding out about what sort of inspired you originally, but also I'm genuinely excited to sort of see your YouTube channel and find out more about the book. So I shall make sure I keep a track of those things coming up, just so that anyone else who's listening to the podcast wants to also find out a bit more and potentially find out about the book and the YouTube channel and then all of the other things that you're doing. Where are the best places people can go to either find out more or get in touch, etc.? Website, social media.
If it's me, it's School of Holly. So Instagram, I'm School of Holly. YouTube will be School of Holly. My website is schoolofholly.wordpress.com, because it's just a free one. And then the Facebook groups are Making Photographic Practices More Sustainable and Photography, Books and Theory. Those are the main places.
So I really do appreciate you taking part and sharing your time with me and on the podcast as well.
Thank you.
So yes, thank you once again, Holly. Thank you.
I'm so glad Holly could take the time to have a chat with me all about her work and her passion and all her plans for the future as well. Make sure that you have a look at what she's up to through all of her social accounts, websites, etc. I'll be putting all the links in the podcast details. I will also be sharing a version of the podcast on my own YouTube channel, which is Shutterpod. So do go and have a look for that too. And if you want to find out more about Photopocene and get in touch to take part, just visit my website, josiepurcellphotography.com. But come back soon to talk more eco-conscious photographic art in an audio way.